Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, as the dust from the 2024 NFL Draft now comes settling down. Now comes the really droll part of the year. I remember I used to always talk about this like going up to April, but then it's like once you get to April and the draft concludes and you're like, okay, now can we just get football back? Now can it just be August? Now can we just get into the preseason and see all these guys? There's a lot to digest after everything that took place with the NFL Draft, and who better to bring on the show today to talk everything Chargers? You thought I was going to say who it was, but no, I leave those rights up to Dan Wolkenstein. Dan Wolkenstein, take the floor, and please, if you would.
Yes, Chargers fans are excited. The crescendo of the draft, and now we're at the crash, but I honestly think it's still going to be some crescendos happening with some possible free agency moves. But we'll talk about the free agency so far. We'll talk about the NFL Draft with longtime friend of the show, LA Times, Jeff Miller, joins us today, talks all things NFL Draft. His grades. We'll talk about how they can maximize Justin Herbert, so much more with Jeff Miller next on Chargers Unleashed.
Before we do that, I want to remind you guys that BetOnline is your number one source for all of your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NFL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow on your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport that is out there. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to get into the action and use the promo code UNLEASHED. Going over to BetOnline today, where the game starts.
We have a fun one today, Chargers fans. Longtime friend of the show and friend of both of us personally, Jeff Miller from the LA Times, joins us here again on Chargers Unleashed. Exciting times for Chargers fans. Jeff, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Again, seeing you in a room with light this time, Jeff, is very gratifying, and from where I know you're at location-wise, I don't think that we have to worry about, those automatic timers going off and people possibly giving you the hint to get out of the media room this time. So I'm really happy. This is going to be fun.
I hope I don't disappoint. I hope my electricity doesn't disappoint either. So
I hope it doesn't. We'll find out. Look, we have a lot to discuss with you today, and you are probably one more than most can give a lot of perspective on kind of this Chargers staff and the new regime, the new era, and the draft selection. So kind of let's just kick this thing off with kind of the Jim Harbaugh era. Since he was announced as the head coach, like, so much has changed with his team. From the staff it was brought in, Joe Hortiz, the GM, all of the names that are no longer on the roster, you got free agents added, and the draft that we just had. What do you make of just the overall offseason so far? Like, is it what you expected, or are there some things that maybe caught you off guard since Harbaugh began in January?
Well, I think the thing with Harbaugh is none of us really knew what to expect, before he got here. This is a celebrity coach who shows up with a giant reputation. So he walks in the door, and we're all looking at him kind of sideways, like, what's this wacko weirdo going to do? And he hasn't disappointed in some of the weirdness, but so it was hard to have real expectations because I had never been around him. I'd never talked to him before any of this. I didn't know anything. I didn't know him at all. I had covered the year the 49ers made the Super Bowl. I was at that Super Bowl and they played the Ravens, and the most I was around him was in these giant press conferences where there's hundreds of people in a room. So I remember being in some ballroom in New Orleans and thinking, that's kind of cool. The two brothers are coaching against each other. But at that time, of course, LA didn't even have a team. So, we were sort of on the outside of the NFL. So I wasn't watching real close. I wasn't, there's certain things I was doing and writing about the two brothers. Someone else was doing that. So I really wasn't paying that much attention to that. So I knew nothing about him. So, but if you want to, in terms of, this is the third coach I've covered with the Chargers. What's different and is very clear. Anthony Lynn, Brandon Staley talked about certain things. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, and the commitment was sort of there. With this guy, like, there is no question that they're going to run the ball. Like, that's been his thing, right? Since he got here, we're going to be a running team. Vince Lombardi would be proud of us, all that stuff. Well, there's no they're not just talking about it. Everything they've been doing, so much of what they've done this offseason is right to that core of that. And it goes right, from through free agency, the decisions they made. I mean, the two receivers that left, everybody's kind of freaking out, understandably, about that. But then they go, what do? They sign a blocking tight end. That's the biggest investment they've made this offseason is a blocking tight end. And then they bring in the two running backs that, everybody knows what those guys have done when they're both healthy. And then it goes through the draft, and in the first pick, they pick a tackle, which, I think everybody saw that coming, but still some people were like, wow, they passed on Neighbors. And so the thing is with this guy is like, there's no question everything's very intentional, and they are. Yeah, I hate the all in. Everybody's all in on everything now, but they're all in on what they do. Like this Harbaugh is going to do Harbaugh, and basically it's like the Chargers hired this guy, gave him a ton of money, and I think just got out of his way and said, "Do your thing," and that's what we're seeing.
Jeff, you mentioned it. You've covered this team for some time now. You've seen multiple drafts of this franchise, coaching regimes tied to Tom Telesco and company. In short, just in terms of since Joe Hortiz arrived and since the whole Batman Robin discussion between him and Jim Harbaugh kind of came to be, how does this makeup or philosophy in this year's offseason and draft under Harbaugh and Hortiz compared to what you've seen from the previous GMs and coaches that you've covered?
Well, the real difference with this, especially with Harbaugh, is you know his plan. And his plan succeeds because it always has. So that whole element of can Anthony Lynn coach? What's Brandon Staley going to be like as a head coach? All of that's gone. So the feeling, if I was a player on this team, I would be super fired up because I know we're gonna be successful. He's going to get enough time that we're going to be successful, and there's no question about the coaching. That's gone. All those questions about can this guy do it are long gone. So nobody has to worry about that. So I just think there's a confidence and there's a belief and that if you're a player, if you're a fan of this team, you just got to ride with it. And you might not completely understand the Neighbors' decision. You might not completely understand, why would we take another tackle? We got two starting tackles already. You might not get like, what's happening with the wide receivers. You might not understand any of that stuff. You just got to go with it because I'm sure that's what the Chargers, the people above Harbaugh, that's what they're doing. And and from what I understand, from what everybody says, that they've stepped back and said, do your thing. And I think there's that confidence that around all this stuff that for a team that won 5 games last year, it doesn't feel like this team won 5 games. There's a sense, I think, around the building. I think there's a sense, really everybody's got, even, people in the media and national media. I mean, I saw something the other day, the Chargers after the draft for Colin Cowherd as the 10th best team in the NFL, which is insane. I mean, they're the 10th best team. Like, that's crazy. So, but I think it's all because of one man. It's all because of Jim Harbaugh. And that's the biggest difference and something around this team I've never felt until the last few months here.
Now, is there have you noticed anything with the staff on how they are bought in or how they are connected to the new vision versus years past? Because the staff seems very large. And there's a big brain trust there. But how do you see the interconnectiveness of all of them?
Yeah, and I think, Nick Hardwick said it the other day, Jim Harbaugh calls, you say yes. We were talking about offensive line assistant, former Charger player. We all know that. But we were talking to him about getting hired, and that was what he said. Jim Harbaugh calls, you say yes. So I think there's that. I think all these guys, a lot of them obviously have worked with Jim. A lot of them have worked with Jim's brother. So they knew Jim because of John, so he'd been around. The guys who maybe didn't have a lot of history with Harbaugh, a guy like Nick Hardwick, who they didn't really know each other, that's the reaction. They're all, you buy in because you know what you're buying into. There's no mystery to it. So there is, I don't know how you couldn't be connected right now because you this guy reaches out, he extends your hand, you reach back, you shake hands with this guy, he pulls you in. Now you're along for the ride, no matter what happens. So, until they start playing games, until they start losing games and there's stress and all this other stuff, you just got to go with it. And I think the other thing about this staff that's a little bit different is there's a lot of experience of these guys who played in the league, guys who've been in the league coaching for a long time. Again, there's, when Staley was here, we talked about, a lot of us in the media, we never could figure out why he didn't bring in a veteran guy to help him with some of this stuff, a long time, coach, whatever, a guy who'd been in the league a long time, whatever it was, sort of, like a Wade Phillips when, McVay started with the Rams and Wade Phillips was there, and it was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. This,
like a Vic Fangio type. Yeah.
Completely. And and it never happened. Well, on top of a head coach, being 60 years old and having done this forever and done it at a high level, he's brought in guys with as much experience or more experience than he has. So that, again, I go back to kind of what I said last time, all the mystery about the coaching staff and all that, it's all gone. I mean, we know it. We know what the offense is going to look like. Now, the defense, a little bit of more of a mystery, a little more of an unknown. But, ultimately, we know if this team wins and plays well, we know what it's going to look like. And so at this point, I mean, everybody's along for the ride, really. And Harbaugh's, behind the wheel, so kind of like buckle up and hang on kind of thing,
Yeah. And I think Chargers fans probably, and this is not just fans, but nationally, almost unanimously are excited about this draft class the Chargers has had. 9 picks in total, almost unanimous. You're getting A's and A-minuses across the board nationally. Let's do a little word association. We'll get into the draft selections now. 4 of these for you. Right. Of the 9 selections there, which selection would you say is the biggest value selection?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm looking at the list right in front of me. I hate to start like my first thought is Brandon Rice, but then that's a 7th round pick. Maybe McConkey. A lot of people thought he might go in the first round. That's a guy who. We just based on we all know they needed a wide receiver, and they got, by all accounts, a really polished, good one, a guy who we all expect is going to contribute right away, and just there's no reason not to think that this guy isn't going to come in and have a big year. So I guess I would say him, and I'm holding back a couple names here just because I'm trying to anticipate what you're going to ask next. So I'm going to go with Ladd McConkey just because, they did get him in the 2nd round, and like a lot of people thought he could have been a 1st round pick. So
it's a good answer.
And because they needed that position desperately.
It's a good answer. So we got 3 more of these to sprinkle in. Most immediate impact. Which selection will have the most immediate impact?
I guess I'll have to say probably Joe, all the 1st round pick. I don't think the full expectation is he's going to be the starting right tackle. And I don't think anything short of that would be very surprising. So, I mean, I think that's a guy who I think it's one of those situations when we see him, it's kind of like when Corey Linsley got here, when he's, and Mike Pouncey before him, when he was on his game, it was like, oh my God, that's what that looks like. So I think Joe Alt's going to be that, where it's going to be like, oh yeah, that's the difference. It reminds me of a few years back, I was doing the playoffs and I was at the 49ers were playing Packers up in Santa Clara, and I had watched the Chargers that season, and then I'm watching the 49ers offensive line, and like the second series, I was like, oh, so that's what the offensive line looks like. That's what. So I think Joe Alt's going to have that effect where it's going to be like, okay, yeah, that's what a tackle, when you have 2 tackles, that's what the right tackle is supposed to look like. So I'm going to go with Joe.
Jake, taking away the last 2.
Your favorite selection out of days 1, 2, and 3, who was it?
Oh, wow. I kind of like this Cam Hart kid. He's super smart. you know, he's the only thing about Cam that I'm a little leery about is the stuff you hear about him is kind of the JT Woods stuff. And it's like, he's got the body, he's got this, he's length, he can do all this stuff. The difference, of course, is, they took Cam a little later where they didn't get in the third round. But I think, he seems like a really bright kid. He seems, I like talking to him when he was on the call. Yeah, again, that's a position where there's a chance to, some of these guys are going to have a shot if they can show some stuff early. And I for some reason, I kind of like these Notre Dame guys. I don't know why. Maybe Alohi Gilman, Drew Tranquil, they might have, kind of tainted my view. Not tainted, but they might have given me the rose. Yeah, they might have sweetened the pot because they're both such good dudes and good. I like talking to both of them. So, I'll go with Cam.
And finally, what selection would you consider to be the biggest surprise out of days 1, 2, 3?
So now, see, I thought I was going to be able to. I didn't realize surprise. I thought I was going to be able to go on about Junior, because that's the one I think
we got a question for you about Junior. Don't worry.
We're pretty excited about. Surprised. And I think it's a good sign that this is a hard one to answer because there were no shocking, head scratching. What in the world were they thinking? I guess the one issue is okay. I got to slow down now. Boygby, Justin Boygby.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So the only reason I would say surprising at all, he has this neck injury that he had a couple of years ago. Played with it last year, played great with it. Had no issues. Told us he's fine. Joe Hortiz said they medical checked out and everything. They have no concerns. That is something, I sure hope the kid never has to deal with it again, but it is something that's a little scary. So maybe from a surprise element, I'm sure some teams looked at him and thought, I don't know if we want to make that commitment and we're going to go, I'm not going to say he was, had the black mark on him. No, we're not going to draft this guy under any circumstances. I don't know if any teams had that, but I'm sure some teams had the flag of okay, if he's maybe around a little bit later, we'll look at him. And again, it's a 4th round pick, so it's not like, something where they invested, too early on him. But I guess surprising only in the fact that, that's a fairly significant, if there's any risk of all these picks, that was the one where you'd think, but like I said, hopefully it's not an issue. Hopefully we never talk about it. We never have to write about it or any of that stuff. But that would be, I guess, but again, it's hard to come up with what were they doing? I can't believe it. No one saw that coming because you look at all these picks, they all make sense. From a positional standpoint, from, other than Kamani, I got to slow down these names. Other than Kamani Vidal, right, that running back, they're all big school guys, played in huge games, know what it is to play in a big environment, played against guys who are going to be in the NFL or are in the NFL. So it's hard to, there's no projects. There's nobody who, it's going to take 3 or 4 years. So there isn't, there really isn't a shock. There's no shocking, surprising, what in the world, where'd this come from picks? And I think that's a good thing.
Let's turn it over to the defense because specifically as it relates to the linebacker spot, a lot of turnover at that position. Everybody expects Deion Henley to see obviously a bump in play. You bring back certain familiar veterans like Denzel Perryman, and then the Chargers go out and select Junior Colson, who was one of the favorites for the Chargers to do if Jim Harbaugh was going to select some of his guys from Michigan. And you had a good quote from Colson in your LA Times article where Colson said, "I believe that I am the guy in the middle that they've been looking for." What do you make of that selection overall and the impact that Colson could have on this defense?
I think that was definitely a Jim Harbaugh, and I think they were I'm sure that we were targeting him. I'm sure they were targeting him, and that's a position, as we all know, it's kind of like running back and linebackers have kind of got kicked to the side of the road in a lot of these, the last few years, and so it's not as dramatic a position as it used to be. Like, when I was growing up, the linebacker was the best player in the team in a lot of cases, and now you see, we've seen it with this team. The guy leads the team in tackles and he's gone the next year, and we see it all the time. So, but having said that, I think in this defense, it's a really important position, and I think that's a guy that knows the defense and knows exactly. He's going to show up day one knowing what's going on. He'll be here next weekend at this rookie mini camp, and he'll be in these classes. I'm going to tell you right now, he's going to be telling other guys what to do, like how to do stuff, and he'll be explaining things to other players. And I feel 100% confident in that, because he knows, he knows the system. I'm sure there'll be some, it's college and NFL, so there's going to be some tweaks and stuff, I'm sure, but he's going to show up knowing the language. And so that gives him a leg up, and that gives him a huge, what's the word? Like I was almost said head start. It didn't give him a false start. It gives him a head start. A lot of other guys are going to be catching up, and so you always have to be leery about, like, after the pick. I was asking Joe and Jim, like, what's happening at linebacker? Like, is Denzel a starter? Is this guy could he come in and start? Like, what's happening? And and they don't want to commit to anything, but Jim mentioned Denzel, obviously, and then Junior, and then he mentioned Deion. So that to me indicates, okay, these are the three guys they're looking at. I mean, these are the three guys that, in those two spots. And I think, going into this, we could see some kind of a rotation. We'll see how it shakes out. But I mean, it's hard to, I try not to get too, buy in too heavily on any of these rookies just yet, especially after the first and second round, because you never know. Sometimes it takes guys a little while, and it might take Junior a little while, just NFL speed wise. The thing is, we know it's not going to take him a while to get the defense. So, maybe he'll play, he may play from day one. We'll see. But I mean, he's a guy, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't contribute on some level on defense. I don't think this is going to be like, Deion, where he was mostly a special teams player and obviously playing behind two guys who are veterans. That situation has changed at the position. So I think the path is there for Junior to play and play a lot and play right away. So as long as he can stay healthy and get into training camp and make it through camp healthy, and he's a guy we could be seeing a lot of early on. Sure, yeah.
We're talking to Jeff Miller from the LA Times. For those of you listening on ESPN Radio, you can check out the full episode on LAC_Unleashed on YouTube. Jeff, let's continue this thing going on the other side of the ball, though. Let's go receiver. The receiving room is going to look a hell of a lot different this season. Keenan and Mike no longer there. 3 selections in the draft for the wide receiver room. Some UDFAs as well. Like, what do you make of this new and improved wide receiver room? New and improved. I don't know if that's actually true yet. Coaches have talked about, like, building a basketball team, right, with different skill sets. Is it, like, mission accomplished, or are there maybe traits or receiver archetypes that they're still without that you think they need?
Yeah, I think there's definitely room for more. I think we all anticipate they're going to sign somebody here, one of these veterans who's still left. Not that it's going to be anybody to get real super excited about, but I think what they don't have is they really don't have, other than Joshua Palmer. They do, it's kind of, again, I look at him, he's like a guy, he doesn't seem like he's been here that long, and he's like the veteran presence. And Palmer's a good dude, and he's a pro. He's real serious. He's football. That's what he does. I don't know if he's necessarily. I mean, you can watch him and just do what he does and follow him, but he's not. It doesn't seem like terribly vocal. So I could see them trying to get a guy who's a little more experienced, maybe a little more of a outgoing, kind of like could maybe sort of tutor some of these guys a little bit, and just and don't get me wrong. I mean, if you show up and you just copy what Joshua Palmer does and how he works, you're going to be fine. But there's another level, I think, maybe of sort of mentorship that they don't have right now. And then let's face it, I think Justin Herbert would be, happy if a a more experienced guy walked in the room and be like, okay, that's a guy who I know I can go to because, right now, I mean, after Joshua, I'm sure Justin's like, well, hopefully this lad McConkey kid is everything, and it looks like he can catch and he can do his stuff. And after that, it's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Quentin Johnston. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. New coaches, maybe he'll find another level. He'll find himself maybe under this new regime, and then they've got a bunch of young guys. So, the thing is, I don't know that they need elite wide receivers to win with this offense and with this quarterback. Somebody I was talking to the other day said, well, one thing is Justin Herbert's going to make all these wide receivers better, and which is true if they can catch the ball, which, he tried to make Quentin Johnston better last year, and Quentin just couldn't hang on to the ball. So if they catch the ball it's still it's still going to be built. That's a room I think we're going to see them continue to add to. And I wouldn't be shocked if at the end of training camp, that's, they bring in a guy who gets released, that kind of thing, depending on how it looks through the preseason and all that and where they're at. But it's definitely not what it was, but I don't think it has to be for these guys to win football games.
Let's talk about one of those wide receivers in particular, because Brendan Rice, when he was selected to the Chargers, he's basically been the feel-good story since the draft, not just because of when he was selected in the 7th round, but also under the circumstances of what he was going through at the time when he was selected. And he looks to be coming in with a chip on his shoulder. He said to Joe Hortiz over the phone that the Chargers were one of the favorite teams that he wanted to play for. What was your impression collectively from Joe Hortiz, Jim Harbaugh, and the rest of the group that ultimately ended up making that decision about how they feel about him as a player?
I think they view him as a guy that can make plays down the field. And he did that, playing for an NFL quarterback, right, at USC. So I think that's kind of what they envision. I was talking to a scout yesterday who was saying that one of the issues he has with Brandon is that he doesn't get great separation. And they were talking about how at SC, he wasn't always great getting open. And that maybe led to some of his numbers maybe not being as big as you might have thought. But he did make plays down the field, and he has a way of getting in the end zone. And he scored a lot of touchdowns at SC. So I think both of those things are if you combine those two things with his body. I mean, he's got an NFL body, and obviously his dad was a great NFL player. So there's that pedigree. So I think and that's another. We talked about McConkey maybe going around later than he could have. Obviously, Brandon's a guy who some people thought would be, 5th round pick, maybe 6th, and these guys get him in the 7th. So. Again, another value pick position they need. And I think both he and Cornelius Johnson, like Joe Ortiz said it after the draft, the first thing he said was these guys have NFL bodies. And that and so they look the part, which that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it certainly doesn't hurt. So but he's a guy, I think the biggest thing is they feel like maybe he can do some stuff down the field. Not the Mike Williams level jump ball stuff, but that's something else that this scout mentioned that he's done too, is that he was really good at those sort of 50-50 jump ballish type stuff. And we know Herbert, if he's got a guy who will do that, can do that, he'll go to it. So, and again, I don't want to make this guy sound like he's Mike Williams, because Mike Williams was a, top 10
first round talent for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but he does have that element. Apparently he's shown that element in his game. And if that helps him get on the field, that's something that, Dan, you mentioned, what maybe skill are they missing? What's not in that room? That's something that, Mike Williams walked away with that's not in there right now. Maybe this is a guy who can bring a little bit of that. Again, another guy has a clear path to playing time, both he and Cornelius Johnson. If they can do anything, I mean, the path is there for these guys to play if they show that they're ready and that they have the skill sets and they can get on the same page with the quarterback.
Joe Hortiz has said before the draft, during free agency, even during his introductory press conference in terms of building the team in general, but he has always said that the work is never done when talking about improving the roster. And we've heard the rumblings lately about, the Tyler Boys, the MVS, the DJ Sharks, and just always looking for some ways to improve the roster. It's never final to him. And now with the draft in the rearview mirror and the way that we can kind of project out to say, like, okay, this is what the depth chart is going to look like. Here's going to be some of the camp battles as far as who's going to be competing for certain positions. But what positions do you feel that the team could look to strengthen between now and the beginning of the season?
I think we all are in agreement. I think both you guys will agree. I mean, they're a little thin in safety like that. They brought in 3 undrafted safeties, again, all 3 from big programs. And I think, I think that's, I think that's an acknowledgement that, yeah, I mean, we might need some help there. So let's look at these guys. And there's still some safeties out there that they have, depending on how this kind of unfolds, they could be looking at. So that's a position. I think we talked about the wide receiver. That's something they could, I think they will address. I'd be very surprised if they don't sign one of these veteran guys. The center, I mean, there's, they brought in Bradley Bozeman, who's a veteran, but, there's some room maybe there. I kind of, I'm a little leery about this cornerback situation. I mean, Asante, okay, we know what Asante is. Christian Fulton, he's been a starter, but he also gets hurt. He's been hurt. I think every season he's played, he's gotten hurt. And not that, that's not a knock on him. It's just that's the reality of it. And then we've seen Jasir Taylor do some stuff, but and Dean Leonard do some stuff.
You don't sound real optimistic about the current squad, Jeff.
I'm a little, I don't know. I mean, I'm interested in you guys. Am I the only one that has concerns about, like, it seems like to me that's another position. If they had a veteran guy, like if they brought in a veteran nickel who we know, okay, this guy can play and he's going to play, I'd feel better about that. Now, we have to be real too and understand the who's out there still. We have to understand the finances. You can't have all pros at every.
It's like we temporarily there went Jeff Miller's internet.
Dude, that wasn't me.
You know what? You can blame me for that one. You can blame me for that one because I totally set it up at the beginning of the show. So I'm so sorry.
I want it noted, everybody watching this, I had nothing, right, Jake?
Yes.
Nothing.
It's totally Jake's fault. Jake definitely did that.
It's now at the point now where I'm sorry, Jeff, but I hope your power goes out on every single show that we have because now it's just become such a good recurring trend that it's just going to be a mystery. At what point is the internet going to drop? Is the lights going to go out? Like, who cares? Now I want the power to drop on the show.
You cannot make this stuff up. It's just now 3 in a row. I mean, we're trifecta here. Go to the lottery.
I don't know. I'm starting to wonder about this. If this is really just a coincidence or not.
Great moments.
I'm thinking.
No, but anyway, to answer your question, no, you're not the only one who's uneasy about the cornerback room. And Jake, we've talked about it. One veteran, and you slide everybody down one, in my opinion. I think you're feeling pretty good right now. But right now, I think you're a little bit over your skis, and you're basing a lot of this on hope. And that doesn't win football games. I forget who said it, but someone said that. Hope doesn't win football games. And so bring somebody in, I think, to help kind of steady the ship.
Yeah, we've seen that, right, with this franchise. And I think probably every team has seen it. But, I mean, it seems like it happens a lot with these guys where it seemed like it happened a lot under Tom Telesco where it was like, okay, if everybody stays healthy, if everybody plays, and then the season starts and then all of a sudden – they're scrambling to, undrafted free agents are, coming up and it's like, oh boy. So
maybe that if will finally be answered with Ben Herbert at the helm in terms of keeping these guys healthy. We'll see. Maybe that makes a difference. I don't know. I mean, I hope it does for the players' sake. I mean,
the one thing is I've gotten older. I got to tell you guys this. I always I hate when guys get hurt. Like everybody hates when guys, but it hits me deep because like these guys are such good athletes, they're in such good shape, and I hate when they get hurt. It's just like especially if it's a fairly significant thing. Like I feel like I'm their dad. Like I get like all panicky. Like it's weird. Like I never was. I think it's just that I'm older, and so like I get like all concerned. And like I get all worried. So
this is a touching moment from Jeff Miller.
Wow,
right
Jake's
here.
like out there with like the apples and the orange slices and the Band-Aid, just making sure all the kids are all right.
It's like so. I hope Ben Herbert. That's my clumsy, awkward way of saying. I hope Ben Herbert. I hope this works. I hope he really does have an impact. It's football, and guys are going to get hurt. Like it happens. Michigan had injuries. Like they weren't like all health. I mean, they didn't have a ton last year, but I mean, yeah. So hopefully, especially a guy like Fulton, who Harbaugh mentioned specifically that he hopes that Ben Herbert's program will help a guy like that and avoid some of the soft tissue stuff. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that happens. But again, it's football, and guys are going to get hurt. So, so we'll see. But yeah, I'm glad to hear you guys say that because sometimes I feel like I was running the other day thinking, how come people aren't talking more about corner? Like it seems like, and I know they have addressed it and they've done some stuff, but it just seems like that is one that and wide receiver are the kind of the two spots, and then just the depth at safety. Those are kind of. Those would be probably my concerns right now, my biggest concerns.
We're wrapping with Jeff Miller from the LA Times. If you have not done so, please go subscribe. He's had a bunch of good articles as of late, talked about kind of the new regime under Jim Harbaugh, talked about kind of what this new phase of Chargers football with Joe Alt being the selection, went through all the selections they had. We're going to get to draft grades and projections here in a second. But you kind of mentioned it with the injuries and kind of maximizing, these young, talented, athletic players. Let's talk about Justin Herbert for a second, because from what we've seen so far this offseason, especially on the offensive side, like the staff seems just hell-bent on becoming a balanced and physical team, like improving the trenches, protecting Justin Herbert, first and foremost, in establishing a run game in order to help win actual football games. Do you have like any concern that they may be leaning too far into that ground and pound physical game and maybe wasting some of Justin Herbert's abilities? Or do you see what they're doing as essentially the most effective way to maximize the crown jewel of a quarterback that they have?
Yeah, I think right now, kind of like with everything, I think you got to sort of give Harbaugh a pass and say, okay, this is your thing. You've done it. Keep doing your thing. But yeah, I think all of us in the background, I mean, everybody I've had a chance to ask, I've asked, like, what is this going to look like for Justin Herbert? Like, what will this offense, to the point where I even asked the offensive line coach the other day, what's this going to look like? And knowing he's an offensive line coach, what's he going to say? And he said nothing. So, I mean, Mike Devlin, nice guy, but he said nothing. He didn't answer my question, but that's okay. But that's kind of where I am. I'm trying to feel this out. Like, for a quarterback, what's this going to look like? Now, Harbaugh's had all the success. We all know that. I don't know that he's ever had Justin Herbert type quarterback to work with. I got to believe he's smart enough to realize, and if it's not him, somebody in that building is telling him, hey, don't forget, look at what number 10 has done. So until we start to, until they start losing games or really struggling in games because they're not throwing the ball, I think you sort of got to ride with it and see how it plays out. And we're not going to know any of this, really until the games start, right? Because we're not going to know until it really counts when the starters are going, how this is going to look and how this is going to look specifically as it relates to Justin Herbert. But these guys know. I don't think. I mean, they know what they have at quarterback, and I think they're.
That's why they're not trading him. By the way.
Yeah. And I think it seems ridiculous to think. I can't imagine week 3 we're going to be asking Greg Roman, when are you going to start throwing the ball more? Or when are you going to go to Herb? I can't imagine it's going to come to that. It just seems so ridiculous. I think, to be honest with you, what I think we're going to see with Herbert is more than game in, game out, massive numbers, throwing the ball a bunch all over the place, going crazy. I think what's going to define him and this team, what they're going to need more than like 60 minutes of like crazy Justin Herbert. They're going to need him in those key moments to come through with a play, which I think we all know he can do. And maybe if he isn't asked to do it so much throughout the course of an entire game, week after week, you know, he'll be able to, I don't want to say pick his spots, but it'll look more like those elite game-winning late game guys who make the play that we've seen, the Patrick Mahomes type plays that he makes all the time. I think that's going to be what Justin Herbert's season is going to be, and what in this offense is. It's going to be more about when they really need him to win a game, if he can make that play. And like I said, we've seen him do it. So I think that's probably what this is going to ultimately be with him is we're going to see more of that than, have the huge monster, games where he's player of the week, like when he was a rookie and kept winning that Pepsi award every week and all that stuff.
Another one.
I think it's going to be more of like, okay, we needed him to make this play on this down in this moment. And then if he makes that play, everyone's going to be, there's Justin Herbert doing his thing. And but the thing to keep in mind, though, too, is that no Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams. Those are, in the tight end situation right now is, that's another, and this offense, they're not going to throw to the running backs. So we're not going to see there's no Austin Eckler's. You look at the stats of these guys who play the Ravens, they don't throw to the backs very often. So it's going to be, the numbers are going to be affected too a little bit by what's around him. I think, especially this season, it looks like.
Last one for you, Jeff. It's time for a Jeff Miller seal of approval. Want to get your overall,
or maybe not.
Which
or not?
Which, by the way, I want to point out has absolutely zero value. Is worth nothing. Absolutely nothing.
On that moment, that I'm really happy for you to give your Jeff Miller seal of approval on this. But let's start with overall draft grade. You can give it whatever letter you'd like, and then because I know it's been a while since we have had you here on the show, since the Jim Harbaugh, Joe Hortiz, this entire staff, just give a general grade for the offseason for the Chargers.
Well, I think Dan or Jack, I can't remember, one of you guys mentioned earlier, I can't find a negative word about the Charger draft. I don't know if you guys have seen anything. Is anybody? So that's why.
And you also look at the fun part for me. The fun part for me is comparing the Chargers drafts. Like, just look at the 9 picks, take a screenshot, and then compare those to others where I'm like, wow, like this looks good.
So they're all, so I can't, I think I had to do, not for the LA Times, for somebody else, I had to do a thing. And I think I gave him an A- just because I'm one of those teachers that doesn't like to give A's, I guess. And I want to always, you got to strive for more, kid. So
dangling the carrot, Mr. Jeff Miller.
Right? But, if these guys who make a living doing this and studying the draft and deep diving into every player and know this is the guys they do. Their life is doing the NFL draft, and they all think it was great, and they're all saying A, B+ are the worst, A-. I got to go A. I'll stick with my A- because it's like I said, there just wasn't one pick where you hesitated and thought for a second, like, wait, what was that? They all made sense. They all were positions that, every one of these guys, has a shot to play. There's a path for these guys to play. Now, they're all not going to play. They're not going to go 7 or 9 for 9. Okay, let's be real. But and like I said, there's no Trey Pipkins a few years ago where we know this guy's going to have to. This is a project. It's going to take him a few years. And there was certainly no JT Woods where it's like, reach. None of those guys. There was none of that. So from what I can tell and what everybody else is saying, I think they nailed it pretty good.
Yeah. And overall,
for
the off season. Sorry, Dan.
So yeah, overall, the Chargers won, and I hate to say they won the off season, whatever. The Chargers won. If you can win the off season when they hired Harbaugh, like it seems like that everything changed. That everything about this franchise changed when they were able to get that done. When they committed the money to it, they were, I don't know if they had to convince him to leave Michigan. I kind of doubt it. I mean, I think he knew that what else can he do there? He had won at his alma mater. I mean, it's not going to get any better than that. Everything is, but you guys know everything's changed. Now all of a sudden there's Charger fans all over the place because they're Michigan fans. Let's be honest. They were, they hired a guy from a super popular program that everyone loves because of what just happened. Everybody in Michigan loves this guy. Now all those people are fans of the Chargers because they love Harbaugh, so they love the Chargers, and now they're all Justin Herbert fans, and everything has changed. Like the whole the perception of this team, the perception of ownership, like all of that changed the moment that they sent out that tweet that we've hired our guy, and they hired. So, losing Keenan Allen, crushing. Losing Mike Williams stinks, but it's hard to look at this as anything other than a victory because of really, and I hate to just put it all on one guy, but that's what's happened here. And that's what they've done. They've given this over to him completely. And, I've got to give him an A, I guess. I don't know.
No A plus. Obviously, Jeff can't give A plus.
He doesn't give those.
No, that does not exist. But I don't think so. I guess think of it this way: like the roster right now, you could certainly make the argument that they're not. They step back. Like they got rid of their two best wide receivers. They got rid of the receiving tight end. They got rid of a guy who scored 1 million touchdowns, and Austin Eckler. They got they lost both their starting linebackers. They're the middle of their interior line. There's some questions there. We really didn't talk about that, but a little bit there. The defense, the whole thing is some questions. Does anybody think they're not going to be better than they were last year? Like everybody thinks they're going to be better, right?
That's coaching.
And that's kind of the trickle down of Jim Harbaugh, right? Like it's kind of like once Jim Harbaugh happened, the rest was able to exist. Like if there was no Jim Harbaugh, it's probably no Joe Hortiz, no Jim Harbaugh, no Jesse Minter, no Jim Harbaugh, no Ben Herbert, like the whole nine. And so you're right. Like everything starts at the top.
If, whoever it had been, if it had been Mike McDonald, if it had been Raheem Morris, any one of these other coaches, a first-time guy or a guy who'd done it and maybe been okay, not great, Dan Quinn, who obviously had some, got a team to the Super Bowl, but again, it changed. The whole when you get a guy who we know can get to the Super Bowl, we know can get to the conference championship game 3 times in 4 years is the only time he did this in the NFL. Who just won a national championship? It took him now. Don't forget, it took him 9 years. It took a little while at Michigan. Don't forget they had trouble with Michigan State at one point. Then they couldn't beat Michigan, Ohio State. Then they couldn't win the Big Ten. Then they couldn't win a playoff game. Well, it took a little while. So I don't know that we should be expecting them to win the Super Bowl in the next 2 years, but we should be expecting them to be better. And right now I think right now they're as bad as they're probably going to be under Jim Harbaugh, and it's only going to go up from here. So, I just think when hiring him, it changed everything. It answered all those questions. All that stuff about coaching was gone now. We know he can manage a game. Now watch, they'll screw up the first week. Week 1, there'll be some weird.
Don't you put that on them, Ricky Bobby. Don't you do that. Don't you do that, Jeff Miller.
All that stuff's gone. Like we know the offensive coordinator's done it. The defensive coordinator's done it. Like there's no, they've got a really good special teams coordinator. they've got guys. There's experience all over the place on the coaching staff. They've got this elite strength coach now. Really to me, like this is probably, it's kind of one of those things where if you're going to get the Chargers, this is probably the year to do it, because I think they're going, I think they're just going to keep getting better, and we'll see where it goes. But it's, there's no reason not to think that this is, this can't end really well for the Chargers and their fans.
Jeff Miller bringing in fire this entire time. Jeff, appreciate your perspective.
I feel like I talked a lot. Are you guys like I'm gonna get off this? You're gonna be like, God damn, you wouldn't shut up. Like, stop talking.
No, I mean, honestly, I think that's part of the reason we have you on the show, is so we don't have to talk as much.
Yeah, this is just talking ball, Jeff.
Because I'm usually just talking ball. You're not going to believe it, but I'm usually the guy that like sits there quietly and listens and then says something and then
this is your revenge. This is your revenge tour. It's just like for all that time that I have to just sit there and go like this the entire time. Now it's my turn to talk. So see, this is just you getting back at the system.
Yeah, I just get it out of my system. My goodness.
Yes. But honestly, so much goodness. And I think you're right. Like, to kind of close this thing out, a lot of times with new head coaches and new regimes, there's a lot of undercutting that happens where they come in immediately. The first question is, oh, well, can they succeed? Are they going to be able to do this? And they question their ability to lead, to coach, to mentor, to implement. But you can't do that in this new era with Chargers football. And even with a guy like a Dan Quinn, there's a bunch of questions about, like, can he win? Or is it more than just Jim Harbaugh is kind of an enigma in the sense of it breaks a lot of the typical trends you see in new coaching cycles, and how public reporters, folks like yourself, when you're questioning, there's a lot of, I don't say undercutting, but there's a lot of wait and see that is unproven that Jim Harbaugh just doesn't have to deal with. And the players and the staff probably are all in line because of that.
No, I think you're 100% right. I'm surprised that more teams didn't. I mean, and maybe it could have just been they knew, hey, the Chargers
he's going to LA,
and he's going to go take the quarterback. I mean, it may have been that simple, because I'm surprised more teams. I thought there'd be more. I thought the Chargers had to battle a little more to get him, honestly. So.
Yeah, Jeff, what do you got going on the next couple of weeks? I know they got mini camps and training camps, OTAs, and all that kind of stuff coming up. What's going on in your life?
Yeah, so we got a rookie mini camp next week, which will be interesting. It's always fun to see these guys, and especially these undrafted guys, and see what they look like. And there's always some guy that you go, wow, that guy's bigger than I thought. What's funny? J.K. Dobbins the other day, okay?
Excellent interview, by the way. Excellent interview.
Like, I think, Dan, you tweeted, right? Like, you talked to that guy for 5 minutes. It's like, I want this guy to win. Like, this guy's great. Like, you root for the guy. Like, he's so honest, and he's like openly admitting, like, people should think I'm injury prone. I mean, I've been injury prone. So, but he walked in, and I was like, oh my God, he's a munchkin. Like, he was so short. Like, I could not believe. I thought, like, I had in my head, I had never seen him in person. I thought he was like a bigger guy, and he walked in. I was like, he's my height. He's actually he's 5'10", I guess, so he's a couple inches taller than me. But so that just got me, when I mentioned the undrafted guys, you see them and you don't know what you kind of get a sense. So whatever I see next weekend, I'm not going to let it taint if a guy's not as big as I think he should be, because that's a guy who was not as big as I thought he was going to be, and he's obviously had some success. But so the biggest thing right now is just, it's going to be that the rookies next week, and we get to see them a little bit, and so that's always interesting, and it's always fun to see these guys. He just got drafted, and I always love it because they show up and they're kind of the big man, because it's all rookies. And then in a few weeks, when the varsity shows up, all of a sudden those guys are kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like,
they go from seniors to freshmen real quick.
Yeah, it's kind of like, remember we all wanted to talk to you last week. Never mind now. We're going to wait till like week 3 of training camp. We'll come back and talk to you again, but you could just go do your thing, be your rookie right now, because we got all these other guys we're going to talk to. So yeah.
Jeff,
so other than So
Jeff, you're the best, man. Honestly, I can't wait to see. If you haven't given him a follow, please, at Jeff Miller, LAT, right, on X. Does a bunch of articles. Go check out. Please subscribe. Does a lot of great work. Jeff, you are always welcome on the show. Friend of the show. Thank you so much for doing this, man. We love you.
I love it. Love working with you guys. You know, I'm fans of you guys. So, you know, I'm here anytime. Anytime you need me. And I know
Jeff Miller is making us blush here on Chargers Unleashed. What is this?
I do, by the way, I'm not oblivious. I did notice you got some other writers on before me, but that's okay. I'm not going to take it personal.
We save the best for last sometimes.
I'm here for you. I'll do whatever. The one thing my ego is fits in my pocket. You want me to go, whatever, last minute, you need somebody, I don't take it personal. I'm here for you.
Jeff, you are the best, man.
Thank you, man.
For Jeff, for Jake, Dan Wolkenstein here, Chargers Unleashed, LA Football Network. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next on Chargers Unleashed.